Kitchen Confidential: Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly by Anthony Bourdain. Let me paint you a picture. Picture a wedding reception at a bustling seaside restaurant. The bride looks absolutely stunning in her white gown, her new husband and family happily enjoying their meals just yards away. But here's the thing, the bride isn't with them. She's snuck out back, behind the restaurant near the garbage bins, dress hiked up around her hips. And the restaurant's chef? Well, he's taking full advantage of the situation, while his entire kitchen crew, dishwashers, line cooks, everyone, watches through the window like it's primetime television. Meanwhile, there's this young, lost dishwasher in that kitchen, a kid who feels completely directionless in life. He's watching his chef, this absolute pirate, this rock star, getting an impromptu send-off from a complete stranger's bride, and something clicks. In that bizarre, inappropriate moment, he knows exactly what he wants to be. He wants to be a chef. That young man was Anthony Bourdain, and Kitchen Confidential isn't just a collection of wild stories like that one. It's your backstage pass to a secret world. The world that exists behind every restaurant's swinging kitchen doors. This book didn't just sell millions of copies and top bestseller lists. It was a complete cultural phenomenon that changed how we think about chefs, restaurants, and the very food we put in our mouths. Bourdain wasn't just a cook. He was a renegade storyteller, a punk rock philosopher who happened to wield a chef's knife, and he pulled back the curtain on the gritty, hilarious, and often brutal reality of the culinary underbelly. This is the story of a man who went from washing dishes in a tourist trap to becoming a celebrated chef and globe-trotting icon. But how did he get there? What did he learn in those dark, chaotic kitchens that can teach us about life, work, and finding our own path? I promise you this, by the time we're done, you'll understand the secret code of the kitchen. You'll know why ordering fish on a Monday is a terrible idea, why brunch is basically a battlefield staffed by the second-string team, and why the people cooking your food are some of the most extraordinary, dysfunctional, and fiercely loyal misfits you could ever meet. But more importantly, you'll discover the profound life lessons hidden beneath all the grease, grime, and glory of a life spent on the line. For young Anthony Bourdain, food wasn't some grand adventure. Throughout most of his childhood, it was just fuel, something you consumed when hungry, like filling up your car with gas. Then everything changed on a family trip to France. It happened aboard the Queen Mary, that magnificent ocean liner crossing the Atlantic. He was just a kid, maybe 9 or 10, when a waiter served him soup. But this wasn't ordinary soup. It was cold. He'd only ever known Campbell's tomato soup, always served piping hot. Confused, he asked the waiter what it was. "Vichyssoise," the man replied. That single word, vichyssoise, was like casting a magic spell. He remembered every detail. The waiter ladling it from a gleaming silver tureen, the tiny chopped chives sprinkled on top, the creamy blend of leek and potato, and the thrilling surprise that it was served cold. It was the first food he truly noticed, the first meal he remembered genuinely enjoying. Something inside him awakened. Later on that same trip, his parents made a pilgrimage to La Pyramide, a legendary French restaurant that was basically the center of the culinary universe at the time, run by the famous chef Ferdinand Point. And what did they do with young Anthony and his brother? They left them sitting in the car. For 3 hours. Sitting there, bored and increasingly furious, a profound realization began forming in his mind. Food could be important. It could be an event. Something with secrets and significance. And being denied, it opened a door in his thinking. He decided right then, out of pure spite, that he would outdo his parents. He would become the true adventurer. He would eat absolutely everything. That defiant decision led to another life-changing moment. He found himself in a small oyster village, out on a boat with this crusty old fisherman named Monsieur Saint-Jean. The fisherman reached into the water and pulled up this enormous silt-covered oyster. He popped it open with his knife and handed it to the boy. His parents hesitated. His little brother recoiled in complete horror. But young Anthony, filled with that newfound defiance, took the glistening, almost alive thing in his hand, tilted it back, and in one slurp, wolfed it down. He later said he remembered that moment more fondly than losing his virginity. It tasted of seawater and flesh, and somehow of the future. He had survived. More than that, he'd actually enjoyed it. In that moment, he learned that food had real power. It could inspire, shock, and impress people. It was an adventure, a risk worth taking. That single oyster set him on a path he'd follow for the rest of his life. A long, often self-destructive chase for the next new sensation. His life as a cook, and eventually as a chef, had officially begun. Of course, the journey from that first oyster to becoming a chef wasn't exactly a straight line. By 18, Bourdain was, in his own brutally honest words, a spoiled, miserable, self-destructive young mess. He'd dropped out of college and was drifting through life, completely rudderless. He ended up in Provincetown, Cape Cod, a small fishing village that transformed into a chaotic, anything-goes party town every summer. Broke and desperate for work, he landed a job as a dishwasher at a tourist-trap seafood joint called the Dreadnought. It was there, scrubbing pots and peeling endless mountains of potatoes, that he discovered his calling. And it wasn't the work itself that hooked him, it was the people. The cooks absolutely ruled that kitchen. To him, they were like gods, a tribe of modern-day pirates. They had their chef's coat sleeves slashed off, wore faded headbands and gold hoop earrings, and sported tattoos everywhere. They had this undeniable style and swagger, and they seemed genuinely afraid of nothing. They drank everything in sight, stole whatever wasn't nailed down, and carried these big, intimidating knives sharpened to a razor's edge. They even spoke their own profane secret language, this dialect of counterculture slang and local terminology that was both intimidating and absolutely alluring. To the young dishwasher, watching from the sidelines, this wasn't just some job. This was a life of adventure, of looting and pillaging and rock and rolling through life with complete disregard for conventional morality. From where he stood on the other side of the line, it looked pretty amazing. That was the summer he witnessed the infamous chef and bride incident behind the garbage bins. And seeing the absolute power and freedom his chef seemed to possess in that moment, Bourdain knew exactly what he had to do. He wanted in. He wanted to be a chef. But wanting something and actually earning it are two completely different things. The next summer, the Dreadnought got bought by the owner of the most respected and feared restaurant in town, Mario's. The Mario's crew were absolute legends. They were the loudest, crudest, most intimidating cooks around, and they served hundreds more meals per night than anyone else. Bourdain, feeling cocky from his minor promotion the previous year, showed up for his tryout shift wearing a brand-new light blue seersucker suit, ready to totally impress what he thought were local yokels. He got assigned to work the broiler station alongside this guy named Tyrone. Bourdain describes him as being 8 feet tall and 400 pounds of carved obsidian, basically a black Viking with a silver-capped front tooth. Completely unintimidated, Bourdain started running his mouth, bragging about his so-called experience, trying to act like some street-smart professional. They were not impressed. At all. When service actually started, it was absolute chaos. Orders poured in faster than he'd ever seen. The tickets were written in Italian, filled with code names he couldn't decipher. The heat was absolutely horrific. Flames leaped from the pans. The floor was literally ankle-deep in spilled pasta. He was drowning. Then he burned himself, just a small red blister rising on his palm. Foolishly, he asked the giant Tyrone for some burn cream and a Band-Aid. The entire kitchen went silent. Tyrone turned slowly, his eyes completely bloodshot, sweat dripping from his nose. "What you want, white boy?" he said. "Burn cream? A Band-Aid?" Then he held up his own enormous hands. They were a horrifying constellation of water-filled blisters, angry red welts from grill marks, and old scars where hot fat had literally made the skin roll off. They looked like something out of a horror movie. While Bourdain watched, completely transfixed, Tyrone reached under the broiler with his bare hand, picked up a glowing hot sizzle platter, and set it down right in front of him. He never even flinched. The other cooks absolutely roared with laughter at his humiliation. He'd been completely exposed for what he really was, a loud-mouthed, useless little punk. They started calling him mal carne, bad meat. That night, something fundamental inside him changed. He decided he would go to the best cooking school in the entire country, the Culinary Institute of America. He would endure absolutely anything: evil chefs, terrible pay, brutal working conditions, and he would come back. He would earn hands just like Tyrone's. He would earn his place in that world. He would show every single one of them. The Culinary Institute of America, the CIA, was definitely a shock to his system. Located in a former Jesuit monastery, it was a world of identical white uniforms and funny paper hats. For a guy who idolized Hunter S. Thompson and Iggy Pop, this was a massive change of scenery. But he was ready. He had a mission now. The school in the 1970s wasn't quite the prestigious institution it is today. It was filled with farm boys, misfits, and various flunkouts. The curriculum was old-school French, based on the heavy cream and butter-laden dishes of Escoffier. Think beef Wellington and lobster thermidor, that kind of thing. The instructors were mostly burned-out European chefs, many full of what Bourdain called gin blossoms and spite. But Bourdain actually thrived there. He was older than most students, had real-world experience under his belt, and wasn't remotely afraid of the pressure. The final class before graduation was the legendary E-Room, the Escoffier Room, a 3-star restaurant open to the public, ruled by this monstrous, iron-fisted French chef named Chef Bernard. Bernard was rumored to have actually worked with Escoffier himself, and his name was only spoken in terrified whispers. If you screwed up in his kitchen, you got what they called the 10 minutes. In full view of the dining public and your trembling classmates, Chef Bernard would unleash the most withering barrage of scorn imaginable. "You are a shit chef," he would bellow. "I make 2 cook like you in the toilette each morning. You are a disgrace. Look at this merd." He'd stick his fingers in your failed soufflé and fling it dramatically onto the floor. Students would literally go AWOL rather than face him. One of Bourdain's friends, a Vietnam combat veteran, disappeared just days before graduation, absolutely terrified of his turn on the soufflé station. When Bourdain's time finally came, he was ready. He'd already been humiliated by Tyrone. He'd already hit rock bottom once before. As Chef Bernard began his tirade, Bourdain did what he called the convict thing. The louder the authority figure got, the calmer and more detached he became. Bernard saw it in his eyes. He recognized that this kid had already been broken and put back together. The fat bastard didn't scare him anymore. And because of that newfound resilience, Bernard actually respected him. After graduating, Bourdain felt like a dangerous commodity. He had formal training, real street experience, what he called a criminal mind, and an impressively extensive vocabulary of curse words. He was ready for the big time. Or at least, that's what he thought. His first major job was at the legendary Rainbow Room, perched high atop Rockefeller Center in New York City. It was one of the biggest, busiest restaurants in the entire country, a genuine madhouse. The kitchen was this long, narrow trench with roaring flames on one side and a vast, boiling steam table on the other. The heat was so ridiculously intense that cooks would regularly just pass out on the line and have to be dragged away to recover. The crew was a rough bunch of lifers, hardened veterans protected by a powerful union that guaranteed their jobs, but also pretty much ensured a certain mediocrity in the food quality. It had this jailhouse atmosphere, full of hyper-macho posturing and drunken ranting. During his first few weeks, his personal tormentor was the shop steward, this big ugly cook named Luis, who apparently thought it was his divine right to constantly grab Bourdain's rear end. One day, Bourdain finally had enough. As Luis came in for another unwanted grab, Bourdain subtly turned the huge, rusty meat fork he was using and brought it down hard, sinking both tines deep into Luis's knuckles. Luis screamed like what Bourdain described as a burning wolverine. The whole kitchen erupted in laughter, and just like that, his entire life there improved. The other cooks immediately started treating him as an equal. He had officially made his bones. After the Rainbow Room, Bourdain and his old friends from Provincetown decided to try starting their own culinary revolution. They took over this failing restaurant in Soho called Work Progress. They genuinely saw themselves as an all-star group of culinary superstars, like a rock and roll band that was going to completely tear a new hole in the New York restaurant scene. It was, as he fondly called it, the happy time. They were high basically all the time, on pot, cocaine, quaaludes, LSD, and increasingly heroin. They actually believed it was their professional duty to work through the drugs, the exhaustion, and the pain, while showing absolutely no visible effects. They were this band of brothers, these ragged and debauched warriors, who expected nothing less than total victory. They were also complete pranksters. One of their favorite gags involved crafting frighteningly realistic severed fingers and other body parts out of sweet dough. Some unsuspecting waiter would open a refrigerator to find a bloody, torn fingertip, Band-Aid still attached, pinned to a slice of bread. Their greatest performance art piece was when they stripped one of their own cooks, a guy named Dimitri, completely naked, covered him in stage blood, wrapped him in saran wrap, and hid him in a chest freezer. They then innocently asked a manager to grab a box of shrimp from that particular freezer. When the poor guy lifted the lid, he discovered what he genuinely thought was the nude, blood-splattered corpse of their missing colleague. He was so utterly terrified he couldn't even return to work for an hour. But of course, the party couldn't last forever. The restaurant was failing badly. Paychecks started bouncing, and vendors demanded cash on delivery. Bourdain saw the writing on the wall and basically jumped ship, leaving his friends to go down with the sinking vessel. He was moving on to his very first actual chef job, with the unfortunate beginnings of a pretty nasty little heroin habit tagging along. What followed were what he called the wilderness years, easily the lowest point of his entire career. Fresh off heroin and stabilized on methadone, he became, in his own brutally honest assessment, nearly completely unemployable. He was this shiftless, untrustworthy coke sniffer, bouncing from one doomed restaurant to another, often working under an alias just to get hired. He worked in seedy hotels, sad lunch counters, and deserted crab houses. For a while, he even worked in this mob-run chicken joint, where all his cooks were ex-convicts from a halfway house, and he had to have meetings about bread deliveries in the back of idling Buicks with guys who went by names like Mr. Brown. He was a culinary ghost, basically feeding on the expiring dreams of misguided restaurant owners, just trying to scrape together enough money for his next fix. He was a complete disgrace, a disappointment to his friends, his family, and most painfully to himself. He was in this deep, dark hole, and he finally knew it was time to try and climb out. The man who eventually pulled him out was this West Village legend that Bourdain simply calls Bigfoot. Bigfoot was this cunning, manipulative, brilliant, and physically terrifying restaurateur who ran his operations with the precision of a military general and the paranoia of a mob boss. The very first thing Bourdain heard about him was actually a rumor that he'd killed a guy with his bare hands. Bourdain was at his absolute lowest point, broke, shaky, and fresh out of rehab, when Bigfoot hired him to cook lunches. On his very first day, Bourdain had to swallow his pride and ask for a $25 loan. Bigfoot, without any hesitation whatsoever, handed him $200. It was this tremendous leap of faith, and Bourdain was so genuinely shaken by this unexpected trust from such a notoriously cynical man that he swore right there he would never, ever betray it. In Bigfoot's world, there was order and discipline. You showed up for work 15 minutes early, period. 2 minutes late, you got sent home immediately. It didn't matter if the president's limousine had crashed right in front of you, and you had to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. If you were late and you lied about the reason, you were fired on the spot. Bigfoot taught Bourdain what he considers the single most important lesson of his entire career. Character is far more important than skills. Skills can be taught to almost anyone. Character, you either have it or you don't. Bigfoot understood that there are fundamentally two types of people in this world: those who do what they say they're going to do, and everyone else. Under Bigfoot's intense supervision, Bourdain was completely transformed. He went from being a druggy screw-up to a serious, capable, and genuinely responsible leader. He learned how to properly run a kitchen, how to effectively manage people, and how to command real respect. Bigfoot got so deep inside his head that to this day, Bourdain admitted he still woke up every single morning at 5 minutes to 6, always before his alarm, because the thought of disappointing the man, even years later, would feel like complete treason to his trade. If Bigfoot was his boot camp, his time with Pino Luongo was definitely his finishing school. Pino was the owner of this string of high-profile, celebrity-filled Tuscan restaurants, a man known throughout the industry as the Prince of Restaurant Darkness. He was feared, envied, and admired in equal measure, a complete master of both food and the brutal politics of the high-end restaurant world. Bourdain, who up to that point had actually kind of sneered at Italian food, got hired as the executive chef for Pino's newest venture, Coco Pazzo Teatro. It was his biggest break yet, with a salary higher than he'd ever even dreamed of. But he was immediately thrown into a pressure cooker. He had exactly 10 days to create an entire menu, order all the equipment, and hire a crew of 30 cooks for a celebrity-studded opening night. The atmosphere around Pino was intensely paranoid and conspiratorial. It was like this jungle of constantly shifting alliances and political maneuvering that made Bigfoot's world look like a friendly playground. One day, Pino called him into his office with this grave expression. "Anthony," he asked seriously. "Do you have any enemies?" Apparently, someone had called Pinot's private number specifically to badmouth Bourdain, calling him a pothead who went around stealing other chefs' cooks. Bourdain was absolutely terrified, thinking his great opportunity was about to evaporate, but Pinot just smiled knowingly. "You know, Anthony," he said with this almost proud tone, "I have many, many enemies. It's good sometimes to have enemies. It means you are important." Pinot taught Bourdain to genuinely love Italian food, to appreciate its clean, simple integrity. But more importantly than that, he taught him how to constantly watch his back. In the end, Bourdain got completely outmaneuvered by the complex politics of Pinot's empire and was eventually asked to step down. He left, but he took something valuable with him: the phone numbers of some of Pinot's best Ecuadorian cooks, who would become his fiercely loyal crew for years to come. All of these experiences, the good, the bad, and the truly ugly, forged him into the chef he ultimately became. A chef who deeply understands the secret world of the kitchen, a world with its own language, its own unspoken code of honor, and its own tribe of beautiful misfits. So who exactly are these people cooking your food? According to Bourdain, they're fringe dwellers, this dysfunctional, mercenary lot motivated primarily by money, the strange lifestyle, and this grim sense of pride. In New York kitchens, they're most likely not even American. The Ecuadorian, Mexican, and Dominican cooks he worked with made most culinary school-educated white boys look like clumsy, sniveling punks in comparison. They understand the American dream of hard work, leading to rewards better than practically anyone else in the country. The life of a line cook really isn't about creativity at all. It's about mindless, unvarying repetition performed under what are essentially battlefield conditions. Their religion is something called mise en place, their carefully organized setup of salt, pepper, oil, and ingredients. It's literally an extension of their nervous system, and if you mess with someone's mise en place, you're basically messing with their soul. The common language is this profane mix of Spanish, English, and French, where "suck my dick" can actually mean "hang on a second," and practically every other word is some creatively deployed curse. It's a world where your street name might be Flaco Skinny, Gordo Fatty, or Cachundo Piece of Ass, and you just have to accept it and live with it. It's a tribe, pure and simple. And like any tribe worth joining, it has strict rules. You are never, ever late. Period. You never call in sick, unless you're literally suffering from dismemberment or arterial bleeding. You never make excuses or blame other people for your mistakes. And you absolutely never, ever steal from your fellow cooks. Bourdain leaves us with a few hard-earned truths from his years in kitchens. He strongly advises never ordering fish on a Monday, because that fish is most likely 4 or 5 days old, leftover stock from the weekend that nobody bought. He warns against brunch, calling it basically a dumping ground for the week's odds and ends, cooked by the B team while the head chef enjoys his day off. And that hollandaise sauce on your eggs Benedict? It's essentially a petri dish for bacteria, most likely made hours ago and left sitting at the perfect lukewarm temperature for germs to multiply happily. And what about that person who orders their steak well done? In the kitchen, this is viewed as practically a crime against food itself. But it's also seen as an opportunity. That tough, slightly questionable end cut of sirloin that's been sitting in the fridge maybe a bit too long? The chef definitely isn't going to throw it out. He's going to save it for well done, completely incinerating it for some customer who won't be able to tell the difference between fine meat and garbage anyway. It's a brutal, completely unforgiving world. But for Bourdain, it was also a world of genuine honor, deep loyalty, and this strange, dark beauty that most people never get to see. It's a world where you earn your place, not through your fancy resume or culinary school diploma, but through your scars and your ability to show up day after day. Lying in bed on a Sunday morning, his hands and feet radiating pain from another crushing Saturday night service, Bourdain takes stock of his own hard-earned scars. The inch-and-a-half callus at the base of his forefinger, where the heel of his knife has rested for countless years. The permanently deformed pinky finger, twisted from a lifetime of handling a whisk. The beveled-off fingertip he accidentally lopped off while cutting peppers. The layers upon layers of scar tissue covering his knuckles. A complete roadmap of one kitchen after another, each scar telling its own story. He'd finally gotten exactly what he always wanted, hands just like Tyrone's. And he genuinely wouldn't have missed it for the world. When you close the final page of Kitchen Confidential, you don't just feel like you've read a book, you feel like you've been formally initiated into a secret society. Anthony Bourdain didn't simply write a memoir. He handed us a key to a locked door, and what we discovered on the other side was a world more intense, more chaotic, and more profoundly human than we ever could have imagined. The most powerful lesson in this entire book really isn't about food at all. It's about finding your tribe, your people. Bourdain was an outcast, a genuine misfit who felt like he didn't belong anywhere in the conventional world. But in the kitchen, among the pirates, the recovering junkies, the ex-convicts, and the determined immigrants, he finally found a home. He discovered a place where the only thing that truly mattered was whether you could actually do the work when it counted. It was definitely a brutal meritocracy, but it was also a refreshingly honest one. Your background, your fancy education, your past mistakes, absolutely none of it mattered if you could hold up your end during a crushing Saturday night rush. In a world that often feels obsessively focused on appearances and credentials, the kitchen was this refuge of pure, unadorned reality. Can you actually take the heat? Can you show up on time every single day? Can you be counted on when the orders are flooding in and everyone around you is drowning? Those are the questions that truly define you in that world. And there's a genuinely powerful lesson in that for all of us, regardless of our profession. It's this call to value character over credentials and real resilience over a perfect resume. Another beautiful idea running throughout this book is the notion of cooking as a craft, not an art. Bourdain had this healthy suspicion of chefs, who thought of themselves primarily as, quote, artists. An artist, he believed, was someone who didn't think it was particularly necessary to show up on time or be reliable. A craftsman, on the other hand, was someone who took immense pride in their professionalism, in their ability to perform a task expertly, over and over again, with consistency and grace under pressure. He reminds us that there's this deep nobility in truly mastering a craft, in dedicating yourself completely to doing something well, not for the applause or recognition, but for the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. So how can we actually apply the wisdom of the kitchen to our own lives? First, learn to embrace the fire, those moments that test you. Bourdain's journey clearly shows us that genuine growth often comes from humiliation and pain. His spectacular failure at Mario's, that humbling moment with Tyrone's scarred hands, ended up being the single most important moment of his entire professional life. It broke him completely, but it also forged him into something stronger. Don't run away from the moments that humble you. Actually lean into them. They're often the greatest teachers you'll ever encounter. Second, find your own Bigfoot, that demanding mentor. We all desperately need mentors who hold us to a genuinely higher standard, who demand discipline and refuse to accept our convenient excuses. It might not always be comfortable or pleasant, But that kind of tough love is exactly what transforms us from enthusiastic amateurs into true professionals, from directionless kids into capable leaders. Seek out the people who believe in you enough to tell you the hard truths you need to hear. And finally, never forget the power of that first oyster, that first risk. Remember what it actually feels like to take a genuine risk, to try something completely new, to step boldly outside of your comfortable zone and taste what the future might hold. Bourdain's entire life was this testament to the idea that truly good food, and a genuinely good life, is fundamentally all about risk. It's about staying open to adventure, even if it means you might get sick, you might fail spectacularly, you might get your heart broken. The alternative is playing it safe your whole life, never straying from the comfortable and familiar, and arriving at the end of your days with this long, painful list of regrets. That was never Anthony Bourdain's problem. And it doesn't have to be yours either. That was a summary of Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. We've journeyed through the highlights together today, but I'll be completely honest with you. A summary can only ever be a basic map. The real treasure is discovered when you make the journey yourself. The true magic of this book lives in Bourdain's unique voice, his raw, witty, and unapologetically honest storytelling that makes you feel like you're sitting at some grimy bar with him at 2 a.m., sharing drinks and stories. Consider this summary your personal invitation. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or made you see the world even a little differently, I genuinely urge you to pick up a copy for yourself. Reading it isn't just learning. It's an experience that will genuinely change the way you look at every restaurant, every chef, and every meal for the rest of your life. A link to the book is waiting in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable and engaging, please take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're heading in the right direction and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another, potentially life-changing book. Let's keep growing and let's keep reading together.